My name's Daniel, I'm 43, and I live in Akron, Ohio, though after this last year, I swear half my soul's still stretched out somewhere on a beach in Maui. I've always been the dependable one in my family, the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who'd quietly pull out his wallet when mom's credit card got declined at dinner, or who'd drive 3 hours to change dad's flat because AAA takes too long. And maybe, if I'm being really honest, I liked that role. It made me feel needed, important, until it didn't. It all started with my sister, Claire. We were close once, the kind of close where I was the first call when she got engaged. But over the months of wedding planning, something shifted. I'd offer to help, and she'd brush me off. My name started disappearing from group texts. I figured it was just stress, you know? But the final blow came in an envelope that arrived 3 weeks before the wedding, no invitation. Not even a pity invite to the rehearsal dinner. Just a note from Claire that said, in so many careful words, we've decided to keep it small. I hope you understand. Small. With a 200-person guest list. Without me. And here's the thing, that's when I broke. Quietly, at first. I booked a trip to Hawaii that night, right from my phone, sitting in the dark at my kitchen table with the taste of betrayal still bitter in the back of my throat. A solo vacation. 10 days, no agenda, no family. And when the wedding weekend rolled around, instead of renting a tux or giving a toast, I was barefoot in the sand, watching the sun sink into the Pacific, a cold drink in my hand, snapping photos I made sure to post on Facebook and Instagram with captions like, "Sometimes you have to choose peace over people." I thought that would be the end of it, a quiet rebellion. But life, and my family, had other plans. The first call came just after I posted a photo of my feet in the sand, captioned, "Not all who wander are lost, some are just finally free." My phone buzzed relentlessly. It was my mother, then Claire, then even my cousin Lindsay, who I hadn't heard from in 2 years. I turned the phone over on the nightstand and ordered another drink. The next morning, my inbox was flooded, texts, missed calls, even emails with subject lines like, "Please call me." That's when I knew something had gone wrong. And oh, it had gone spectacularly wrong. Turns out, just hours before the wedding, the groom, Ryan, the golden boy Claire had been fawning over for 3 years, got cold feet. Actually, cold feet is generous. He walked out, left a note at the venue, and disappeared. While my family scrambled, panicking, trying to do damage control, I was floating in turquoise water, the sun on my face, the salt on my skin, breathing easier than I had in years. And then, just to really twist the knife, I started posting more. Me with a cocktail, me on a boat, me smiling in front of a waterfall. Each caption a little masterpiece of passive-aggressive poetry. Sometimes the best RSVP is no RSVP at all. By the time they figured out they couldn't reach me, they were desperate. And for the first time in my life, I felt no urge to save them. By the third day, the messages turned from panic to guilt. My mom's text shifted from, "Where are you?" to, "I'm worried about you. Honey, please just let me know you're okay." Claire started with anger. "I can't believe you would do this to me," and morphed into desperation. "Please, I need you." Even my dad, who usually stayed out of emotional messes, called twice. I didn't answer. Back home, the wedding was in shambles. Guests flew in from out of town only to be met with a canceled ceremony and a crying bride. Family members were fighting, friends were gossiping, and Claire? She was unraveling. I know all this because they started updating their Facebook pages like it was a reality show. And yes, I watched from the beach, drink in hand, sunglasses on, scrolling through the wreckage. That's when the calls from people I didn't expect started. My Aunt Marlene, my cousin Justin, even old family friends. All of them, in their own way, asked me to come home, to help, to somehow be the glue again. And here's the thing that surprised me the most. I didn't feel guilty. Not a flicker. It was like something inside me had finally cracked open, and instead of spilling out regret or responsibility, it was just freedom. On the 4th day, Claire herself called. 10 times. Then she sent a voice message. I played it once, lying in a hammock, listening to the sound of waves behind her trembling voice. She sobbed that she needed me, that no one else understood her the way I did, that I had to come home and help fix this. And you know what I did? I smiled, finished my drink, and blocked her number. Because here's what they never understood. I was tired. Tired of fixing things. Tired of carrying the weight of a family that only remembered I existed when they needed something. Tired of showing up for people who never showed up for me. So I extended my trip. Another week. Booked a little cottage on the North Shore, away from the tourists, where the only sounds were the ocean and the occasional rooster at dawn. And in that quiet, something inside me healed. I realized I'd spent most of my life waiting for the people I loved to love me back the same way, completely, selflessly, without conditions. But they weren't built for that. Maybe they never were. And I had wasted years hoping they'd wake up one day and see me. Instead, I was the one who woke up. On the fifth morning, I woke up without an alarm for the first time in years. No buzzing phone, no emails, no anxious voice in my head cataloging all the things I should be doing for other people. Just sunlight spilling through the slats of the window, the murmur of waves, and the occasional rooster outside announcing another lazy island day. It was strange at first, the quiet. My whole life had been noise. Noise from family, from work, from my own mind. But here, with no one to take care of but myself, I could finally hear what I'd been missing. Me. I spent my days wandering barefoot down hidden trails, swimming under waterfalls, watching sea turtles paddle lazily in the surf. I talked to locals, ate street food from trucks parked on dusty roads, and fell asleep each night under a sky so wide and full of stars it made me feel small in the best possible way. But while I was slipping into peace, back home the chaos deepened. My cousin sent a long message detailing the aftermath. Claire had locked herself in my parents' house, refusing to eat. My mom was blaming herself for raising a selfish family. My dad was trying to refund wedding deposits. And the extended relatives were divided into camps, some furious at Claire, some furious at Ryan, and some, hilariously, furious at me for abandoning the family in crisis. I should have felt torn. Instead, I laughed. There was something so absurd about it all. For years I'd been the fixer, the invisible glue. And the first time I stepped away, the whole damn thing cracked. Not because I caused the damage, but because they built the whole house of cards on the assumption that I'd always be there to catch it when it fell. One afternoon, stretched out on the sand, drink in hand, I opened my messages. Not to reply, just to scroll. And there it was, a group chat lighting up with photos from the wedding that wasn't. The venue, empty and echoing. My mom, red-eyed. My dad, looking decades older. Claire, collapsed on a couch in her wedding dress, mascara smeared. For a brief moment, something pinched in my chest. That old reflex, that twitch of guilt. But then another thought came clear, sharp, and liberating. This is not mine to fix. And with that, I did something that shocked even me. I left the group chat. By day 7, something inside me had shifted so profoundly it was almost disorienting. I no longer reached for my phone first thing in the morning. I stopped mentally drafting replies to their pleas or imagining the dramatic confrontation I might have back home. Instead, I wandered into a tiny beach cafe, ordered fresh papaya and coffee, and watched the sunrise like it was a private show just for me. And that's when the unexpected happened. Sitting at a rickety wooden table, I struck up a conversation with an older couple, Nancy and Mike, from Oregon, who were on their 50th wedding anniversary trip. They had this easy warmth between them, the kind that comes from weathering storms together. We ended up talking for hours. At one point, Nancy leaned over and said, "You seem lighter than most people we meet here, like you've let go of something heavy." It stopped me cold. Because I had. It wasn't just the wedding. It was years, decades of carrying weight that was never mine to hold. After they left, I sat on the beach alone and realized something almost embarrassing. This was the first time in my adult life I was living for myself. No more rescuer, no more peacekeeper, no more background player in the drama of my family's life. That night, I posted one last photo. It was simple, my bare feet in the sand, moonlight on the waves. The caption read, "When you stop holding up everyone else's sky, you finally see the stars." I turned off my phone after that. Not silent mode, off. And in that click, I felt a peace I can only describe as the sound of chains falling away. By day 10, I barely recognized the man in the mirror. The tension in my jaw was gone, the deep line between my eyebrows had softened, and when I looked at myself, there was something in my eyes I hadn't seen in years calm. For the first time in my adult life, I woke up without feeling like I was behind, like I owed someone something before the day even began. No buzzing phone, no guilt brewing in my chest, just the quiet hush of waves against the shore and the soft creak of the cottage walls settling in the morning breeze. But peace, as I was learning, is fragile. That morning, as I sat on the porch sipping coffee and watching the sunlight ripple across the water, Leilani, the woman who owned the cottage, walked over. She had a kind smile, the kind that made you feel like you were being wrapped in a warm blanket. But today, her eyes carried something heavier. "From the mainland," she said softly, handing me a folded letter. My stomach dropped. I unfolded the paper with shaking hands and immediately recognized the slanted handwriting. My father's. "Daniel, I'm not good at this. You know that. Your mother's worried sick. Claire's not leaving her room. I know you're hurt. Maybe you should be. But we need you. Please come home." The words blurred for a second as something caught in my throat. I set the letter down on the table and stared out at the ocean. For years, I would have taken this as my call to arms. I would have packed my bags, booked the first flight home, and walked straight back into the storm because that's what I did. That's who I was to them, the one who showed up. But as the waves rolled in, I realized something profound. I wasn't that person anymore. That night, I walked along the beach, the stars overhead scattered like confetti across the sky. I thought about the years I'd spent being the bridge, the buffer, the fixer. And for the first time, I allowed myself to wonder what it would be like to step away from that role, to be loved or not, on my own terms. The answer came gently, like the ocean lapping at my ankles. I didn't owe them my peace. Not anymore. The next morning, I walked into town and bought a postcard with a picture of a hibiscus flower. On the back, I wrote 3 words: I need time. I addressed it to my parents, dropped it in the little blue mailbox outside the shop, and walked away without looking back. Later, as I sat on the porch, watching the sun rise and feeling the warm breeze on my skin, I realized something simple but life-altering. I wasn't running away. I was, for the first time, staying where I belonged. A few days into my second week on the island, something shifted again, not in the world, but in me. It happened one afternoon as I sat in a small cove, watching a sea turtle push through the water. It wasn't graceful, more like a quiet determination, an ancient rhythm that had no urgency, no need to impress. I realized I envied that turtle. For years, my life had been about urgency. Family urgency, work urgency, emotional urgency. Always someone's crisis, always someone's expectations, always me trying to swim faster, carry more, prove I was good, useful, necessary. And now? No one needed me. And maybe for the first time, I didn't need them to need me. That night, I walked back into the village and stopped at a small bar where locals gathered. I sat quietly, sipping a beer, listening to the easy laughter, the music humming low under the conversations. At one point, the bartender, a man about my age with salt and pepper hair, leaned over and asked, "You're not from here, are you?" I smiled, shaking my head. Not even close. He poured me another drink and said something that stuck in my chest. "You look like a man who's been carrying a heavy pack a long time and just set it down." That simple sentence nearly undid me, because that's exactly what it was. That night, I walked the beach again, but this time, it wasn't about escaping or figuring things out. It was just about being. And then, as if the universe wanted to test me, I heard the gentle chime of my phone. I'd turned it back on, almost absent-mindedly, earlier that day. I pulled it from my pocket. A message blinked on the screen. "Hey, can we talk?" It was Claire. I stood there on the sand, phone in hand, heart steady in my chest. And I realized I wasn't afraid of that message anymore. I didn't feel the rush to fix or explain or smooth things over. For the first time in my life, I could choose. I sat down on the sand, the waves brushing close to my toes, and stared at the blinking message. And with a quiet, steady breath, I typed, "Not yet." Then I slipped the phone back into my pocket, leaned back on my hands, and watched the moon rise, letting the night wrap around me like a long overdue exhale. By the middle of the 3rd week, the island felt less like an escape and more like a mirror. Everywhere I turned, the curve of the coastline, the slow dance of the palm trees, the quiet hum of the village at dusk, it reflected something back at me I'd never dared to face. Who am I, if I'm not the fixer? For so long, my identity had been tangled up in what I could do for others. I was the son who paid the bills when no one asked, the brother who showed up before anyone knew they needed help, the friend who always said yes. But here, with no one to prop up, no emergencies to douse, I met a version of myself I barely recognized. I was the man who could linger over his coffee without checking his phone. The man who could take a nap in the afternoon just because the breeze was too perfect to waste. The man who could laugh, genuinely laugh, with strangers, no weight in his chest. And slowly, a deeper question crept in, curling around the edges of my days. What do I want? Not what they need. Not what makes them proud. Not what keeps the peace. Me, Daniel, 43 years old, standing barefoot on a beach at the edge of the world. What do I want? One afternoon, as the sun leaned low and the sky bruised purple and gold, I sat on the sand and let that question sink into me like the tide. And the answer, when it came, was simple but terrifying. I want to matter to myself. I'd spent so many years waiting for someone to tell me I was enough, that I was valued, seen, appreciated, that I forgot how to give that to myself. That evening, I did something small but seismic. I walked into the village, bought myself a modest silver ring from a local artisan, and slipped it onto my finger. Not as a souvenir, not as a symbol of rebellion, but as a quiet promise. A promise to remember this version of me when I left the island. A promise to stand up for my own peace. A promise to matter, not just to them, but to me. And for the first time, the idea of going home didn't feel like surrender. It felt like walking in as a new man. The last days on the island felt like they existed outside of time. Each sunrise felt like a soft gift, each sunset like a quiet apology for all the years I'd rushed past beauty without noticing. But as the days ticked by, a new kind of restlessness stirred in me, not the anxious, frantic kind I used to know, but something gentler. A nudge, a whisper, a tug at the edges of my peace. I knew what it was. The thought of home. Not the home I'd left behind in a storm of resentment and exhaustion, but the home that was waiting, the messy, human, complicated place where my name still mattered, where my absence had left a mark. One afternoon, sitting under a tree with a book in my lap, I realized I hadn't once checked my messages. The phone sat silent on the table as if it, too, had decided to rest. But when I finally picked it up, there was a quiet surprise. No flood of texts, no demands, no guilt-soaked voicemails. Just one message from Claire. "I'm sorry. When you're ready, can we start over?" I sat there a long time, the screen glowing faintly in my hand. And for the first time, I didn't feel pulled under by guilt or duty. I felt choice. I could go home. Not to fix, not to rescue, but to return on my own terms. As the person I'd become here, not the one they'd known. That night, I walked along the beach one last time. The sand was cool under my feet, the moonlight painting a silver path across the waves. And as I stood there, breathing in the salt air, I felt it in my bones. I was ready. Not to erase the past. Not to pretend nothing had broken. But to walk back carrying the version of myself I'd fought to find. When I got back to the cottage, I packed slowly, carefully, like I was packing not just clothes, but the pieces of a man I wasn't willing to leave behind. I booked a flight. Sent Claire a message. "I'll be home soon." Then I stepped outside, looked up at the stars one last time, and whispered to no one in particular, maybe to the ocean, maybe to myself. "I'm coming back whole." The flight home was quiet, almost unnervingly so. I sat by the window, watching clouds drift past, feeling the strange weight of leaving a place that had rebuilt me. My hands rested on my lap, fingers occasionally brushing the silver ring I bought on the island, a small reminder of the promise I wasn't willing to break. When the plane landed in Ohio, the air felt heavier, sharper, colder. As I stepped out into the terminal, I half expected the old tension to snap back into my shoulders. But it didn't. I moved slowly, deliberately, through the airport, through the taxi line, through the familiar streets of my neighborhood. And when the house came into view, the same old brick, the same slightly crooked mailbox, something in me braced, but something else stayed steady. My parents' car was in the driveway. Lights glowed from the kitchen. As I walked up the path, I saw a figure sitting on the porch. Claire. She looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in a thick sweater, her hair pulled back, eyes fixed on her hands. When she looked up and saw me, there was no dramatic rush, no teary sprint across the yard. Just a long, quiet moment where we both tried to figure out how to cross the space between us. I sat down on the porch steps, a few feet away. Claire exhaled. "I didn't think you'd come." I rested my elbows on my knees. "I almost didn't." She nodded, tucking her hands into her sleeves. "I was awful to you." I didn't rush to reassure her. I didn't wave it off. I let the words sit there between us, heavy and honest. "I know," I said simply. The porch light flickered above us. Somewhere inside, I heard the faint clatter of dishes, my mother's voice humming softly as she moved around the kitchen. For the first time in years, the sound didn't make me feel trapped. It just sounded human. Claire pulled her knees to her chest. "I don't know how to fix this." I surprised myself with the gentleness in my voice. "Maybe we don't start by fixing. Maybe we just start." She nodded slowly, eyes glistening, and then, in a moment so small it could have gone unnoticed, she inched a little closer on the step. Not enough to close the distance. Just enough to let me know. She was trying. And that was enough. For now. Inside, the kitchen light flickered again, and my father's shadow passed by the window. I knew they were waiting. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I was walking into a battlefield. I was just walking inside. Not as the fixer. Not as the peacemaker. Just as me. When I finally stepped inside, the house smelled like it always did, faintly of coffee and old wood, of home-cooked meals and time. My mother turned from the sink, drying her hands on a towel, eyes wide, the air between us tight with all the things we hadn't said. My father stood at the edge of the room, his posture awkward, hands shoved into his pockets like he wasn't sure whether to reach for me or stand back. For a long moment, no one moved. Then my mother took a trembling step forward, arms half lifted in that way mothers do when they want to embrace you but are still afraid they've lost the right. I closed the space between us, wrapping her in a hug that was at once familiar and foreign, because this time, I wasn't hugging out of obligation or guilt. I was hugging because I chose to. Behind her, my father cleared his throat. When I pulled away, he gave a small, uncertain smile. "We kept your room." It was such an ordinary sentence, but it landed in my chest like a soft blow. That night, We sat around the kitchen table, just the three of us at first. Then Claire joined, still tentative, still folding herself small at the corner. We didn't talk about the wedding. We didn't talk about blame or apologies or the long shadow of everything unsaid. We talked about little things, the weather, the garden, the neighbor's noisy dog. And strangely, it was enough. For the first time, I let the conversation flow without rushing in to smooth over every awkward pause. I let silences hang. I let them carry some of the weight. And when Claire quietly said, "I'm glad you're here," I only smiled and nodded, letting the moment breathe instead of trying to fill it with reassurance. Later that night, alone in my old room, the one with the creaky floorboards and faded posters still on the walls, I sat on the bed and turned the silver ring on my finger. I realized the work wasn't over. Coming home wasn't the finish line. It was the beginning of something new. A version of family where I didn't have to be the glue, where I could show up as myself, whole and flawed and human. I turned off the light, listening to the familiar creaks of the house settling around me, and for the first time in years, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this home could hold all of us, even me.